What's up, everybody? We're on screen. Yes. Hi. Let's get rid of passwords. Woo! As we just went through, I work at Sona. I'm a developer advocate there. We have a little stand out there, so come say hi to us. The rest of the team's actually sat right there. They're just a little wave. My name's Phil Nash. I am a developer advocate there. You can find me online in all the places under the name Phil Nash, Twitter, Mastodon, LinkedIn. Just come find me, ask me questions. I love to hear from all of you. So let's get into it, because most people in the world have applications in which they need to log in, hide something around behind an authentication part. And for the most part, we have been authenticating people using passwords. And passwords are genuinely terrible. I hope you agree. I hope that's why you're sitting here. But I will go through a couple of little things just to make sure we all agree with this. Back in 2018, Google ran a survey where they asked a number of questions about account security, where they said things like, how often do you reuse passwords? And this pie chart here shows that 52% of people answered they reuse passwords some of the time. Now, that's not a great start. And of course, there is a nice green section here where 35% of people said they never reuse passwords. And I like those people. I'm a fan of those people. I count myself among them now. What we have to worry about, well, we do have to worry about the some of the time people. We really have to worry about the 13% of people that when asked if they reuse passwords said they do all of the time. These are the people with one password, not the application, but the one string in their mind. And this is terrifying, right? This password, they're normally not good passwords either. They're easy to break, easy to hack, and that's not a good thing. Also, during the survey, I asked whether people use a password manager, and 24% of people said, yes, they do use a password manager. That's cool. They're probably inside that pie chart piece of pie that said they don't reuse passwords ever. Well, that does worry me, because 35% of people said they didn't reuse passwords ever, and 24% use a password manager. So there's like 11% there who are lying, I guess. You don't have to tell the truth to surveys, but anyway. So 24% of people do use a password manager, but that means 3/4 of people don't. Bad times. And then, of course, people who are reusing their passwords are, of course, using all of our favorite passwords. This was the top 10 passwords of 2022 from NordPass. Password winning in 2022. Well done, password. Sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and your very close friend, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I always feel like people who only get to 6 are just a bit lazy. I don't know. If you have used a good password, but you are repeating it, then there's probably an application out there somewhere that has been breached and shared that password with the rest of the world. If you don't know haveibeenpwned.com, you should go there now and check out to see how many of your accounts have been breached and how many of your passwords are out there. And that'll make you think about it and change your passwords fairly quickly. Passwords are terrible. The thing about security and account security like this is that we're surrounded by a bunch of trade-offs. Now, in security, we want to make sure people aren't breaking into other people's accounts, but we also want to make sure that people can indeed log in and get on and do the thing that they intended to get to their application to do. Like whatever you've built for them that they are trying to get through a login form to actually achieve. And so those trade-offs kind of go between user experience and security. And that's the kind of lens I'm going to look at the solutions we have for the rest of the talk now. So passwords on the user experience side of things are bad. It's hard to remember good passwords. It's hard to come up with good passwords on your own, at least. And really, you need a password manager in order to achieve this, any kind of security using passwords. And then on the security side of things, we already know that's a bad thing too. Like, it doesn't work either way. It's easy to break passwords like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 because you can just try that against somebody's account, and if it works, you're in. Woo! But then when passwords get leaked, it's easy for attackers to take those leaks and apply them to other applications and see if that will log them in. And they don't have to break into all the accounts. They just have to break into some of them in order to win. And finally, I haven't even mentioned phishing yet, but passwords are very vulnerable to phishing. I always like that phishing websites always tend to look terrible, and I'm pretty sure everybody in this room could build a really good-looking phishing website. Don't. Like, it's not the takeaway from this. Do not try and steal people's passwords, but we could do it. So first answer is to use a password manager. That allows us to improve the experience. We no longer have to think about our passwords, and we don't have to repeat them. It's all stored for us. We never have to know our passwords ever again. Cool. And then that actually ups the security. We now have long, difficult passwords, which are unique to each site, although still a little vulnerable to phishing if you want to copy and paste it into another form. But this is very much on the user side of things, right? This is not something that we as developers with our applications can enforce upon people. And as we already found out, not enough people use them. So we have to do better than that. We have to take further steps. Now, there are things that we can improve, and we can do with our applications, with a little bit of HTML, a little bit of JavaScript, in order to encourage people to do things a bit better. I'm going to start that with just the autocomplete attribute, my absolute favorite attribute on the input element. If you use the autocomplete attribute new password on an input element with type password, then browsers will normally suggest a strong generated password for people. This is a great nudge. It's a great way to encourage people to be more secure. It doesn't stop them from writing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in that field, but it does encourage them to do better. If you use the autocomplete attribute on login forms, you can use things like autocomplete as username. That's just a heuristic to the browser to properly autofill this in. And then autocomplete as current password means that you can use that to use the existing passwords that have been saved. New password and current password are particularly useful on those pages where you're changing a password and you don't want to autocomplete the same one into all 3 boxes. You want one old password and then 2 new passwords. It helps. And then, on the JavaScript side of things, we have the Credential Management API. This is actually an API that's been around for quite a while, and I don't think it's got as much love as it needs to. And that's why I'm here to actually big up the Credential Management API. It's the most exciting sounding one, right? Credential, yes, exactly. Credential Management API allows us to store and retrieve credentials in the browser. In this particular case, we're talking about passwords. It allows us to store and retrieve password credentials using the browser's password manager. If you have access to the Credential Management API, we can check for the existence of the password credential in the window element, in the window object. And if we have that, we can create ourselves a new password credential using what we know is a correct user ID and password. So you do this at registration or at a successful login. And once you've done that, you can ask the browser via Navigator Credential Store to store this credential. And then and this is going to pop permissions to the user. In fact, it's actually very recognizable permissions to the user because it's the same kind of thing that the browser will already offer. Do you want us to save this password? But when you've done that, when you've used this API to store the password, you can then call on Navigator Credentials Get to retrieve the password. It's still going to cause permissions, but it allows us to get the data that we've stored in the browser and then use it to log in immediately. And so this looks like, I've got some screenshots from, no. You can also do it silently, so if a person hasn't logged out, but you want to just kind of push them through the login flow, you can do it silently using the option unmediated true. I'm not entirely sure I'm a fan of this, but it's there just in case. And browser Chrome will actually show a person that they are being logged in, even if it doesn't actually ask them for permission. But when somebody logs out and you don't want that to be able to happen, you should call prevent silent access on the logout so that it's not going to immediately sign them back in again on the next page load. So the experience of this looks like this on Android. In this case, it's the browser Chrome saying, hey, do you want to save this password? And notably for Google, they will store it in your Google account rather than just on your device in your browser. So this is syncing across things. So if somebody does this on their mobile device, and then goes to log in on their desktop device sometime later, it will be available for them, which I think is cool. When you come back to log in, excuse the odd domain name here, but when you come back to a login, this is the permissions dialog that says, hey, we've got some credentials for you. Do you want to sign in? So this is stuff you should only store on a device that you're using. Don't do this on a library computer or your friend's computer, because then they'll be back logged in as you next time. But it does allow you to sign in with a password one click. And so that's it. I'm trying to improve the experience here. We've added a bunch of stuff with this to encourage the experience of logging in to be better experience. When the browser is looking after this, there's now no longer need to remember passwords, and we're effectively increasing the number of people using a password manager. Sadly, on the security side of things, it doesn't make people use a secure password. It doesn't make people use a unique password. And so we have all the issues that we previously had in terms of security. Like I said, passwords are terrible. This is just trying to increase the experience of it. So let's move on. To help the security side of things, we bring in two-factor authentication. You have probably seen a text message looking like this that says, hey, here's your code, use this to log into the site. And when you've seen this text message, it's because you've had to go dig around, find your phone wherever you left it, because you tried to log into something and it told you you've now got to go and... And then I get those messages, and I get the things saying two-factor authentication, and then I scroll Twitter for a while on my phone, and then I forget what I was doing, and then the message is timed out. And then so the experience, sadly, in this case, has regressed. If we look at the experience, we now have two steps. We need another device. We maybe need phone signal. We can do this via authenticator apps as well, but still, we're looking at a different device. And so our experience has regressed, but the security has improved. And so this is better for more important accounts. This overcomes the poor and leaked password scenario because using a second device, something you own, in order to authenticate you, means that it is much, much harder for an attacker to just replay a set of leaked credentials. It's still vulnerable to phishing. If you can build a site that asks for somebody's username and password, you can build a site that asks for somebody's username and password and then a 6-digit code. And if you're using SMS for this, there are targeted SMS attacks. I don't have time to go into that right now, but come and ask me how broken the SMS system is later if you're interested. But can we make it better? We improve the security. Can we make the user experience better on this kind of thing? And thankfully, the answer is yes. I wouldn't be here if we weren't doing that. First up, we're going to go back to the autocomplete attribute. The autocomplete attribute with the property one-time code will, on Safari, offer up a 6-digit code out of a text message in the autocomplete of the browser, the autocomplete of the browser's keyboard. This looks, I have video for this. This looks kind of nice, I think. In which you go, log in, the text message gets sent, and text message gets sent, pop the keyboard up, and there is the code right there in the middle, ready to be input. All you had to do to get that was add an attribute to the input element. What's really nice about this is if you are very much dug into the Apple ecosystem and you're using Safari on the Mac and you have messages coming through on your Mac as well, then it works in Safari on Mac as well. You can enter your password there, and it will offer that autocomplete in the browser on the desktop. Kind of a magical little interaction there if you weren't expecting this, and suddenly you don't have to get your phone out. It's already appeared on your desktop. I think that's very cool. And it only takes an attribute to do so. However, that's only Safari and it's only Apple. And so we have to look to the WebOTP API in order to help us out on other browsers. The WebOTP API is actually just the credential management API in disguise. I told you earlier, this is just a love letter to the credential management API, and you're stuck with me now. The credential management API, in this case, we don't need to store credentials, but we can retrieve them. And so you do have to make some changes to a text message that you send. In this case, you have to add a final line, which has an @ symbol, and the domain name you're on, and then a hash, and then the code. That @ domain allows the browser to only look at messages that have that domain in if you're on the domain. That's a phishing protection there. We're not going to autocomplete this into a website that you didn't sign into. Once you've done that, we ask the credentials API to get, in this case, the OTP credential using the transport SMS. You can pass an array to transport there, but the only item that goes in that array right now is the string SMS. It's a single item array. But I like that because it does it does give the idea that this could be extensible. This is something we could have an authenticator app do as well. So when we do that, it pops a permissions dialog to the user to say, hey, do you want to allow the browser to use this text message? And when you get it back, you get back that an OTP object with a code property that you can then use in your form. This looks like this when you do it. And it gets a little bit crazy because you see on an Android device, you get both the incoming text message and the permissions dialog at the same time. But hopefully the permissions dialog at the bottom of the screen takes the attention. And you see there it says, do you want to allow Chrome to read the message and use this code? If you press allow, the JavaScript gets that code back, you can fill in the form and carry on. So Two-factor authentication was a regression in user experience, but if we're able to add these autocomplete and WebOTP attributes, we actually turn it into a minimal step, normally just kind of hitting an approve or hitting an autocomplete. And that actually makes it a lot quicker. We don't have to go digging for our devices. It's just done. It still requires the other device. It still requires an authenticator app or text message and maybe a phone signal for that kind of thing. But it's a better experience now that we've added this auto-completion. On the security side of things, we haven't changed that. It overcomes the password problem. It's less vulnerable to phishing, especially if we use the WebOTP API that is targeting it specifically to the domain that you should be logging into. It doesn't fix the SMS system, though. Then we move to security keys. You probably have a security key, especially if you have a work one, particularly for dealing with your work stuff. Security keys are wonderful, and we can use them in the browser using the Web Authentication API. Web Authentication API, or WebAuthn. But, of course, WebAuthn is really just the credential management API. It's Navigator credentials. It's the same thing. Like I said, I love it. In this particular case, the Web Authentication API allows us to use the browser to create and store a public and private key pair. That public, we then share the public key back to the site that you're trying to log into or register with, and that the site can then use the public key to verify things signed using the private key. This is how we create it. We use Navigator credentials create. And in this case, the server sends a challenge, a set of random bytes, which we go and create, which we send into the creation. We also have to say which domain we're on. This ties the public and private key pair to that domain specifically, so it is not possible to phish a security key using web authentication. Then we put in some user details and some algorithms that we can use. And this is going to set up a whole set of cryptography stuff. It's going to sign that challenge and return us both the signed challenge and the public key, which we can share back to the server. The server can then use the public key to verify the challenge and say assign this key to this user. Then when we go back to log in, as a second factor in this case, we can use Navigator credentials get with the public key, send in another challenge, and in this case, it's just going to return the signed challenge. We don't need to return the key again. It just returns the challenge, which you can send back to the server, decrypt, and verify using the public key, and you're through. This is really cool, because now we have this authenticator key that is acting as our two-factor authentication. It's plugged into our machine normally, and we can, and it's just a touch normally to interact with it. So we're back to 2 minimal steps, but it does need an authenticator key. This is not great for consumer kind of stuff, because we cannot expect every consumer to own a security key. And it's tied to the key itself. So if you are logging into another device, you need to move the key to that device or register multiple keys. So bit of an upfront issue there. But on the security side of things, we're now in the world of public and private key cryptography. If that public key is given away in some kind of breach of the service, there's not a problem. It's a public key. All it can be used for is verifying something from the private key. So we can't leak this, and it can't be phished either. As we said, we tied the key to the domain. Now, this isn't great. This is great, wonderful. But we have this. The only difficulty here is needing the keys themselves. So that's where we're getting to in this world where we're trying to remove passwords entirely. And finally, we are at that point. This has been a lot of work, I think, between browsers and organizations that work on the security stuff. And we got to passwordless, which is passkeys. This is the consumer term for it. This is what you actually see Google and Apple talk about when they introduce this to their users. Passkeys are multi-device credentials. Yes, still the credential management API. It doesn't go away. But actually, passkeys are, in fact, just web authentication under the hood, but with a couple of tweaks. A couple of tweaks that mean that we can drop the password at the start of our system. Passkeys is web authentication, but it uses a platform authenticator. And so what I mean by that is on my Mac here, that's the fingerprint touchpad. On my phone, it's Face ID, and you will probably have various devices that have different ways of verifying you biometrically like that. It is a biometric verification, but those biometrics are never shared to the server. So your user biometrics remains safe. This is a good thing. Some people wanted to implement user biometrics as a two-factor authentication idea, which is a bad idea because if those get leaked, it's real hard to change your fingerprints. But using our platform authenticator, the platform itself verifies that the user is who they say they are on the device, and we can trust that. So we verify the user on the device. We get that step sorted before we've even sent any data to the server, which is cool. And then once it's verified, it returns a signed challenge, which we then, as I said, send to the server and authenticate. This actually acts almost as a two-factor authentication because we have biometrics plus something we know, our public-private key pair. It also syncs across devices. And this is the most important thing, really, for the user experience side of things. Our web authentication using an authenticator key meant that we'd have to move keys around or register multiple things. But passkeys are able to sync across devices. Now, this is dependent on the platform. And so if you are on Apple hardware, Keychain with iCloud will sync these keys across your devices. And then if you're on Google hardware, if you're on Chrome OS or Android, that's going to work too. But there's some difficulty there in that if you use different browsers in different places, or if you have an Android device and a Mac laptop, that's not going to sync. And so they built into this system a way to use a passkey across device in order to allow you to log in even if you haven't saved a passkey for that device yet. So this is a good experience. We get to see it in just a second. First, I want to show a little bit of the code. Like I said, it's web authentication with a couple of extra tweaks. And so you have to test for the existence of those tweaks. And this is a little concerning. I feel like the standards committee here was probably a Java developer at some point, as we have to ask for things like, is user verifying platform authenticator available? Look, it's a very wordy function name, but at least you know what it's doing. Actually, I say that, but is conditional mediation available is not quite as obvious. But is user verifying platform authenticator available is a function that we can call to find out whether there is a device, an authenticator on the device, so we can ask for this. Is conditional mediation available? Allows us to show options of passkeys that you have registered with the device. And so if those two things are available, then we can go on and call on web authentication. And so this, again, credential management API. When we create a credential, in this case, we have to ask for a couple of extra things. In this case, it's the authenticator selection part at the bottom. We have to say we want the authenticator attachment to be platform. This ties it to the device. It doesn't allow you to use a key for it. Now, I've done some tests with some people recently who are like, I still want to use my key, though. And it turns out you can implement it with a key as well, with a security key. But we're trying to do this for regular users who don't have security keys but do know how to put their finger on their laptop. And then the other side of things is require resident key. That allows the key to be saved to the device and retrieved later. So if we have those two things, then we get a passkey out of this, as long as the user says yes. And this is what it looks like. I've gone to passkeys.io because it's a really good demo of this, and I'm in Safari on the desktop on the left-hand side of the screen at this point. We don't have an account for it, so we go create one and make a passkey. This has popped that permissions dialog. You have to hit the fingerprint reader and save it, and that's saved ourselves a passkey. Good stuff. And so it's not very exciting beyond the login in this particular demo, but that's what it does. You can go back then to log in and say, now I want to log in with a passkey. I did this demo a few times, and you can't yet delete passkeys. But it's the one at the bottom there with my SonarSource email that we're looking for. So I wasted enough time there to make sure that it synced across to my iPhone, which is now on the right-hand side of the screen. So if we go to the phone, we can go and immediately just sign in with a passkey. And again, we're going to get that long list of passkeys that I've saved. But if we look down the bottom, we find the SonarSource email again. We use our Face ID in this case, and it signs in immediately. You can actually verify that the passkey is the same. It's got the same ID as on the screen there. So that's great across browsers on the same network. But if we go to Chrome now, we can go sign in with a passkey, and Chrome knows we don't have any passkeys for this, so it immediately offers us this QR code. We can then use the phone to scan the QR code, I don't know how to use my phone. Use the phone to scan the QR code and use it to sign in with a passkey, and it gives us the same options again. One more time, we scroll to the bottom, find the Sonar source email, and say, yeah, I want to do that one, Face ID. The passkey succeeds, sends it back to the browser, which can communicate back to the server, and we're logged in Chrome. Now, the one thing this particular demo doesn't show is that we should then offer within that browser, like to register a new key so you don't have to go through the second device process again. But I think that's pretty slick. I think from a registration and then login point of view, we have fixed almost all of the things. So the experience is great. We now have no need for a password. We never have to ask people in the future if they reuse their passwords, because you can't reuse this stuff. We don't have to think about long, difficult passwords or different ones for each device, each application, because it's done entirely for us. It does require the platform authenticator, and while most people, not all people may have a device that is capable of that. And so we do still have to implement the old stuff, which is why, before I get to this passwordless thing, I tell you about how we can improve that stuff along the way. But then it syncs across devices. And again, that's quite a magical little experience, I think, when you've logged in one place and you find you can log in on another device without any more effort. Wonderful. And then on the security side of things, it's all the things I said about web authentication earlier on. It's phishing resistant, it's public-private key, you can't leak it. Oh, it's glorious. I am not a paid professional security consultant in any way, which means I'm allowed to go, is it perfect? Perhaps. The maybe one drawback is that we rely on platforms like Apple and Google to allow us to do this syncing thing. Now, these keys are encrypted by those account passwords before they are shared to the various clouds and only decrypted back on the device. So it's fairly safe, but if you're the sort of person that will never put anything into iCloud or into Google's cloud, then you're not going to be happy with this. But thankfully, those are just paranoid security professionals who don't like doing those kind of things anyway. And this is trying to fix account security and authentication for regular users. Are there some other drawbacks? Well, of course there are. There's always browser support. But thankfully, we're in a position right now where it's supported in Chromium, so across the board kind of Chromium-based browsers. It's supported in Safari, as we've seen in the demos, and Firefox is supposedly working on it this year. I can make no promises for the Firefox team to say whether it's supposed to be deployed this year, but fingers crossed, hopefully. 1Password is a funny supporter of Passwordless. I feel like they might eventually have to change the name of their company, but they're down for it. They also want to see the end of passwords. And so while they're actually trying to support it as part of their plugin, part of their application, they're also supporting people who are building it in. And if you go to passkeys.directory, this is a site supported by 1Password, listing out the places that now support passwordless via passkeys. And you can go look through this list, pick out accounts that you have, and go log in and see if you can register yourself a passkey and get rid of those passwords. I've done this to my Microsoft account, which is nice. I don't have a password to get to my Microsoft account anymore. I've added it to GitHub, but it's only used as a second factor right now. But hopefully that's something we can change. And there are other places. So I have some recommendations for this. This is the time to implement this. This is the time to make our account authorization, authentication, a better experience and a more secure experience for everyone. So detect passkey support and offer it up front. Support multiple passkeys. Like I said, we want to be able to offer a passkey registration if you've had to log in via the QR code method. We still need to build in fallbacks to passwords and include two-factor authentication because passwords are just not enough. But if we use all the tips I went through at the start of the talk, we can make that experience better and slightly more secure as well. And then finally, once a user can use their passkeys, you can offer for them to remove that password, that insecure credential. Like I said, I'd be very happy to remove it from my Microsoft account, and other people can do so too. I have some links in the slide, which I will share out on social media. But other than that, let's get rid of passwords. Let's go passkeys all the way. Again, my name's Nash. I'm a developer advocate for Sonar. Thank you so much for coming.